kill you.
Everybody, and welcome back to Zaku Talk. I am your host, Patrick Scale, and with me today, as always, is the Jello-like... No, that's mean. Let me try that again. With me today, as always, is a perfectly functional body...
Bob Skerry.
Was that less mean?
Only if you keep this part in.
Okay.
God damn.
Sounds good.
I gained weight, man. It's the COVID.
Well, that's so I said Jello-like, and because I wanted you to be like all, I don't know, like a weird wiggly man, but not because you were fat, just because you're just a wacky like inflatable arm guy, you know. Bob, what have you been up to this week?
I have been on a good progress forward. I've been able to connect with a local voice actor on the opposite side of the state. I have gotten a lot of really good tips from him. He's actually helping me to better define what my sound should be from my actual voiceover mic. He's suggesting that I either just get rid of all the stuff I had around it or only use the ISO armor I have and to just get rid of the the shield altogether. So I'll probably end up setting that up against this mic that I speak through next week.
Excellent.
But besides that, I also was able to get a few recordings done. I'm going to be doing some more recordings after this today. And I dropped a couple of bucks on a few games for my Twitch channel, including Among Us, as well as a few others.
All right. And these are like popular games or some such?
Yeah. Among Us is a popular game right now because it is very low maintenance in terms of the visuals. It feels like do you remember Newgrounds?
No, that was like that YouTube
No, you don't,
thing?
because you're an alive skeleton.
Okay.
Newgrounds was a website where people would mess around with flash animation to either make videos or video games. I found that the latter was more true, but it feels like an old Newgrounds game where you go around a space station and you're trying to do these little mini game tasks to keep your space station working. But at least one of the people among you is an imposter and is killing you all off one by one. But you all have to deduce who is the one doing the killing, because you have the ability to call in the body and say, okay, what the fuck happened? And you also have the ability to make emergency meetings once a cycle to say, okay, I think I saw who this was. And you have to defend yourself if you're the imposter by playing it off nonchalantly. It's like when you play Werewolf or Mafia at home.
So it's a multiplayer game.
Yeah, it has a max of 10, but you need at least 4 people or 5.
Okay. It's interesting that what you said about Newgrounds, because, that I remember it very well, as I didn't grow up with a computer. But I remember Newgrounds mostly for the videos that people would show me on it. I didn't even know they could do video games on there. Okay, well, that sounds cool.
But what about you? How has your week been?
Well, the score for my spring project is finally done. All that needs now is to send off those stems to the sound designer, who is now in China, thanks to our quarantine friend. And
I'm sorry, stems?
Yeah, just sort of the pieces of, not instead of just sending one file with all the music and you drop it in. If she needs to mix certain instruments or certain channels, she now has the ability to do that. I'm only used to stems of growing things or the scientific acronyms. No, it's a common thing too in sort of audio broadcasting when a lot of people would take like popular songs but only have the music of it, and so like you can get the stems without the vocals from particular audio sources. And websites, you have to pay a fee, obviously, but like that's how they sort of do the sort of radio promos and things like that. And so we have that now in China, so she will have access to a mixing booth there, mix it all down, and we should be done before the month is over. I've thought that both in July and August, but I would be shocked if this took much longer. There's really not much else to do. I did spend a lot of quibbling with the composer over the score. We discovered a lot of fun things in the process, and we sort of got it in a place where we're both happy. So no complaints there. As for my current project, we are beginning pre-production in earnest. Sort of nailing down a lot of the special effects we're trying to use and the animation styles we're trying to do. The script will change a little bit here and there, but overall it's mostly probably just going to be rearranging or changing of lines more than any sort of new ideas coming in, except maybe the ending. We're not fully satisfied there yet. And it's great to kind of get all this stuff now because I've been also filling out because we're using the Unreal Engine, we can apply for Unreal's Mega Grant, which is sort of a revolving fund of $3 million that they always keep around, and they sort of dole out little bits here and there to projects based on need and scope and what they can do to show off the promise of the engine. So I have to put a lot of these materials anyway, try to get a couple grand to help offset some of the shooting costs we're going to have, renting the screens or the studio space for these LED Onyx panels. That are going to allow us to do similar things to what they've done in The Mandalorian and what they will be doing on many Hollywood sets from here on out. It's just going to be the future, so we get to kind of get in close to the ground floor and get some practice in it now. In a time of COVID, it feels like the smart play. This season, of course, we're doing G versus Wing, episode 12 this particular week. Bob, would you like to tell us about G Gundam episode 12?
He's the undefeated of the East. Master Asia appears. Or, alternatively, Sono na wa Toho Fuhai. Master Asia. Kenzan! Sorry if I peeked. Reports of the Devil Gundam surfacing in Shinjuku send Domon and Rain to Neo-Japan. They run into an army of Death Army mobile suits controlled by the Devil Gundam, and Domon tries to use his Shining Gundam. However, a masked man tells him not to, and defeats the mobile suits with his bare hands. Domon immediately recognizes the fighting style of his teacher, Master Asia. The reunion is warm, but there is no time for idleness, as the situation turns dire. Domon joins the fight against the Death Army alongside his master, and together they take out hundreds of mobile suits. It is then revealed the Death Army is piloted by DG cell-contaminated zombie soldiers.
Yep, that sounds about what I remember. Mm-hmm.
All right, what about you? What about episode 12 of Gundam Wing?
Over here in Gundam Wing, we have Bewildered Warriors, or in Japanese, Mayoreru Senshi-tachi. And there's like a dash in between those last two. Yeah,
Senshi is guardian or warrior, one of the variations. And then the tachi suffix is to group, as in we all.
I see. Mm-hmm.
Or you all. It's often used when you talk about your friends, or if you talk about this specific group of individuals.
All right, and the plot summary here is Hero awakens at a traveling circus troupe after being unconscious for over a month following his Gundam self-destruction. Meanwhile, a depressed Wu Fei encounters former Alliance Major Sally Poe, who is now a guerrilla leader. Sally helps Wu Fei find a reason to pilot his Gundam once more. Very quick and easy there as well.
Yeah.
So Bob, I won't lie. I've been sort of easing into the genre a little bit, and this sort of threw me off again. This episode 12 of G Gundam.
Oh, I don't blame you. There's definitely some laughable moments.
So yeah, it is tricky seeing, watching a Gundam show and seeing a human being fight giant robots on his own, and winning by beating them up. And he also has a moment where he's lifting up some concrete to turn one over, but he looks like he's climbing invisible stairs like in the Looney Tunes. Is this sort of a common thing for this genre? Is this not out of place?
So they, to my understanding, were trying to emulate the ideas of what we would later see more directly in wire fu style films. Obviously, it hadn't been popularized at all by that time. We started seeing it with Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but there is a variation of storytelling called wuxia. It's a Chinese storytelling device, or maybe not device, genre, where you have these mystical martial arts capabilities that seem to be supernatural in nature. So with Master Asia, you saw things like he was able to spin like a tornado. He was able to use a piece of cloth as though it were hardened steel. He was able to catch bullets midair. Like, this is supposed to show that this is who Domon had trained under. And Domon, it has been great. He's been a very powerful fighter, but compared to Master Asia, he's still just a baby. So we're setting up expectations. Actually, when we were talking about Newgrounds just a bit ago, Ego Raptor, also known as Aaron Hansen of Game Grumps fame, had done some really nice insights into video game logic back in the early 2010s, I want to say. It was just before he started Game Grumps, and he did one on Mega Man versus Mega Man X. In Mega Man X, he talks about how you get into this opening stage, you have to fight a boss. This boss overpowers you very easily. You don't even know if you're doing damage to the bastard. And then out of nowhere, Zero comes out of the way and is able to make that boss run away with 1 or 2 hits. That's it. So the theory would be that you need to be able to beat that boss, and that boss is weaker than Zero. If you can surpass the boss, you'll be closer to Zero. So in the same way, we're setting up our high expectations for Domon over the course of the rest of the series by seeing his teacher in action. This is the person that he wants to aspire to being like or better than.
So in the Japanese, is his name Master Asia?
Yes.
Okay. And is he, you talked sort of a lot about him sort of mimicking kind of Chinese styles. Is he Chinese or is he Japanese?
Well, he is the fighting representative for Neo Hong Kong.
Okay.
So, but whatever the case is with that, they really do push this idea that I've seen in a few other stories of this nature, where he is representing the entirety of the continent of Asia in his martial arts. He is more a person who is a denizen of the planet, of the universe, not necessarily a person tied to a nation. It's just that would be closest to having a free Asian nation at the time, I'm assuming.
Okay, and he happened to be in Tokyo on Earth because that's where these guys were doing damage. These Dark Gundam, these whatever, Dark Army.
His reasoning was that he had been challenged and was told to meet that challenger by that government building. Turns out it was a false call sent by the Devil Gundam and whatever the Devil Gundam is using to create this communique. Goes off, goes apeshit throughout the entirety of Tokyo, or not Tokyo, Shinjuku, which is within Tokyo, I guess. But goes through there, tears the place up, leaves it inhospitable, and then Master Asia stays around to make sure that they stay protected, and that's when they start seeing that the Death Army shows up more and more, which I'm surprised you haven't brought up the Death Army yet.
Yeah, I kept forgetting what their name was, but I want to because I'm not even there yet because I don't know, like
come at me.
To some degree, I could get with Scooby-Doo skeleton pilot and be like fine. But like I don't know, it was just weird. Maybe I don't know. Maybe we just haven't seen Domon do a lot of the weird new physics martial arts, or we haven't seen it in a while. But like Master Asia came and he does all this crazy stuff, and then they have their weird meetup where like they're
you mean their call and response?
Yeah, they were like the different backgrounds are in there. They're throwing things at each other.
Yeah, the idea is that it's supposed to be the call and response of a master to pupil. Oftentimes when you're doing your training, you're trying to train your mind for discipline, and that would be a way to go about it. So this is that school of training and thought that you're repeating the morals, the code of that school. I actually have a clip. May I ask you to give me just a few moments? I'm going to mute myself while you continue to rant.
I mean, it's not really much to rant. It's just sort of like there was something about sort of all this Master Asia stuff, all this Master Asia stuff that was coming in that felt sort of very jarring for what we had set up before. But as I look back, I go, but is it? But why then did I feel it was so jarring when I had been okay with a Gundam mummy and a Gundam pilot, and like I'd been getting used to all this stuff, and then Master Asia comes in, does these weird martial arts moves, and I go like, wow, how did we get here again? So I don't know if I just sort of forgot something or just I'm not as used to this as I was expecting, but it was sort of hard to kind of delve into there. I wish, they're clearly moving in a sort of a darker kind of stretch of territory. It seems to be their goal, and they want to focus on this Dark Army and their brother a little more, at least start setting up the seeds. But like, even with last episode, it feels like that's the general direction we're moving into tone-wise. But Master Asia's antics sort of kind of belie that a little bit and sort of hinder it in my mind. But also, I don't think they did a great job of showcasing this battle with the Dark Army. Just sort of your usual reliance on stock footage, but it was just sort of like, all right, here's a panning shot of a lot of them, but we're not seeing that much of their destruction. Based on what we've seen of the world so far, I have no reason to think that most of the destruction here was done by them, because the whole world seems to have been a giant mess anyway, which is part of the early themes. Well, it's more so in
certain locales than others. Japan is apparently higher run than Italy.
Yeah, but I haven't
so on with other places.
I haven't really seen Earth Japan before. So I come here and I go like, oh, another desolate place. And now they're just destroying it more. But I don't know, like people don't feel like they're in danger too much. I don't want to talk about the plan specifically because I think I know why certain things happen and I don't want to give out spoilers.
That's a good idea.
So, I won't sort of, pick on that much because I think there is sort of a goal with it. But visually, it didn't feel sort of the onslaught. I didn't feel the danger. It was sort of a very simple plan that
you're still looking at it through
almost
a Gundam
awry. Of course
mentality.
I am. We're here at a Gundam show, and so if I'm comparing and contrasting two Gundams,
this show is specifically anti-Gundam.
Sure, but
as far as what the themes and tropes are,
fine. But your show
Gundam isn't mostly.
I think why I don't like those genres so much is because they can't get too dark because of the limitations of the genre. So I watch this and I go like, I don't feel the threat, so I'm not really worried. So it doesn't feel like we're darker than we were before. The color palette's just a little different.
I wonder if it's because of so much of the changing that they had to do for the dub, because I heard you refer to them as the Dark Army. When you have the Dark Gundam and the Dark Army and they're dark, it feels very ho-hum. It feels very milquetoast. When I'm over here with the Devil Gundam and the Death Army, where we see that this person is living a horrific half-life inside of this bio version of a Zaku, and then considering that later on in the series, the upgrade that Domon gets to his Gundam, the 2.0, is called the God Gundam, not the Burning, but the God Gundam. So you have God and the Devil, and the idea of the God finger, God touching out to heal and offer holy fire, has more meaning and more strength to it than just burning finger. It's no longer just light, it's fire. Rah! And it's dark versus light. That's so bland.
Well, I'm
looking at it with a different set of glasses.
Well, I knew you were gonna,
as we're doing the watch through.
Well, I know it's called the Devil Gundam, and I knew you were going to bring it up. Because I know it's called the Devil Gundam. I didn't remember what the specific name for the army is. We can get into the other one. Devil Gundam and Death Army, they're still very semantic things, which just have less resonance based on their linguistic nature. So they are going to affect us less due to their spoken thing. But Devil versus God and Dark versus Light isn't really that different in the I don't know, it's 2,000 years after Jesus was born. It's really sort of this nature of like just sort of generic good versus evil. Like the devil is so sort of semantically empty at this point. It's sort of just a stand-in for any evil in the world. Even if you're not, a Christian, you know what sort of the devil's doing. And it might even hurt. I don't know. The devil might even be weaker if you aren't a Christian, but I don't know if I buy that fully. But devil and dark they feel interchangeable to me because they're both sort of standing in for the same thing. They both feel bland to me. The God thing.
And that's fine.
The God thing and imagery are interesting. But since they're not in yet, I'd rather save it for when they get to come in and we can sort of discuss that more. And the skeleton pilot guy, I get the thought behind, us being afraid of it, but he looks too kooky and he looks like the Spaceman from Scooby-Doo. So it's hard to take seriously in my eyes.
I 100% disagree.
Okay, that's fine.
And besides the fact that you've just been attacking this shit when I'm trying to answer you, man, give me a second to rebut.
You had like 2 whole minutes where you went there, and I'm like, okay, I get you, but dark, devil, I don't know, same thing.
Look, you're right. We'll wait on the God and devil allegory stuff as we get further along in the series when we actually meet up with the God Gundam and see any interactions there. I'll give you that. But if you have watched any type of horror movie from roughly the 80s, the decade just prior, there's a lot of really great horror that uses very similar visuals to that. They just added a cyber punk, future punk aesthetic to it compared to, say, Creepshow. Creepshow is the thing that came to mind first when I saw it. Yeah, it looks kind of janky with having the metallic chrome cell structure around this skeleton. But seeing this thing wheezing for death, it is a zombie, but it's also like, just kill me. And then you have like all these different wires going into this thing that is barely kept alive by this horrible disease that it's been struck with. It has gravitas compared to.
Can I talk now, or do you think I'm going to jump in on you?
Go on ahead.
Creepshow is not a good horror film. It is a kitschy, fun horror film. It is not a scary horror film. It is not a horror film with gravitas. Just a quirky, fun horror film. To any of the 3 that they've made, all sort of fun, Tales from the Crypt, wacky sort of things. Are there a lot of horror films that from the 80s on that do use the devil as sort of their main influence for evil and badness? Yes. Are those films scary because of that? Well, not really. There are a lot of strong visual and tension things that they do to help them. And I will also say there's a lot of films from that time period that aren't very good horror films as well that try to use these and over-rely on just sort of the idea that like, she's possessed by a demon. But like,
I don't give
she
a
looks
shit about
creepy.
Possession films. I hate possession and faux Satanism films because honestly, I waver on the idea of being between agnostic and the ideas behind Lucifer, Satan, so on and so forth, because it all stems back from paganism, and we've been washed with Christianity across the nations several times over because of crusaders of varying levels of faith. But not to get into theology in Gundam.
I mean, it's not, I don't know. I don't think it's bad to get into, especially in a show where your main Gundams are the Devil Gundam and the God Gundam. I would feel sort of silly not to talk about it, or it would be a waste of them to use it.
You wanted us to wait on it, and I'm trying not to bring it into...
Well, no, because like I think you bring up a good... I wanted to wait on the burning finger image because I think you bring up a good point that is sort of a potent image, and I think that is sort of a very useful callback. It's just... we don't get to see it in its full effect. Because there's no point talking about it because we have yet to see it in its full effect and what we do gain from it. But just naming something the Devil Gundam, I just don't think is a great sort of tool to use when you consider all that you have in a sort of a cinematic grammar. And so,
I mean, he literally falls from the heavens and is creating havoc and destruction in a way that people would relate to the more demon-like Satan. But also we're seeing, as we progress forward, people being not only struck with malignity, but, well, I don't want to say too much more because it does start coming together more in episode 13.
Yes, we do have to tread lightly. Unfortunately, in our debate, we have to tread lightly here because of stuff that's forthcoming, so we can't fully get into it yet. I just think that there's a limitation to how dark a show like this can feel based on other things that are sort of the tenets of its genre. And it isn't a bad thing. It just limits, what I like in sort of these shows.
Yes, I know, because you like the subtlety, the subterfuge, and the ideas of war.
Doesn't have, subtlety, just sort of a groundedness. And this show doesn't want to be grounded, which is fine. There's clearly an audience for it. It just gets harder for me to engage with it or to feel sort of the heavy moments because I've taken so little so seriously so far.
Well, there hasn't been a whole lot of gravitas overall other than, maybe a moment in a few, not all, but a few of the episodes. And then they try to give us a number of these in episodes 6 and 11.
Yeah.
Because, Reunion and Falling Rain definitely had more going on for it in terms of the story and subtext than many of the other episodes prior to it. And episode 6 actually lets us into who this guy we've been following for the 5 episodes prior actually is, not just as a motion device. And I'll say, too, that this episode has that if you're stepping away from the fact that it's the Death Army, we're not worried so much about the baddies of the week. We're more interested in seeing how Domon reveres Master Asia, especially when his mother has died, his brother is estranged and abandoned by him, and his father's literally on ice. He has nobody, and he can't admit his love and care for Rain. So the only other person that he has close to him in this world, it might as well be him, nothingness, until Master Asia.
Yes.
We see this man break down, this young, early 20s man, break down into tears on his knees to this elder that taught him his martial arts. There's impact there.
Yeah, I think it was good to have, the non-cartoony bits with Master Asia, to see this other side of Domon, to see that something can make him happy for once, and that there's something that he sort of does have kind of respect for in this larger, desolate world. So I think that's a good moment. We also seem to get more hints because Master Asia seems to also do a fire thing on the skeleton pilot as well to kind of cleanse him out. So, if you have some theories now, we're moving towards confirmation. So there are some nice things here. I think, there is no baddie of the week, which should be good and can be good. I think this one sort of hurt because the second episode, it's sort of the same problem the Gundam Wing movie has, where, towards your end, it's just sort of like, battle stuff happening. And so it just feels kind of like a little washed over. They try to put some tension in by having that one thing still stay by, that I don't want to talk about too much because we don't want to give spoilers away. But having something a little stronger for us to care about, the objective being achieved, than just sort of let's lead them away. Oh, look, it's going so well. Oh, no, a slight issue. Might have been helpful to keeping more engagement in the second half. But I think overall, aside from some flourishes, first half does what it needs to do.
All right. Well, I mean, again, I look at this as the whole story. I'm not picking these apart as ruthlessly episode by episode because this is not my first watch through, as opposed to, you who it's not your first watch through, but you've gotten enough of it pushed out of your head that it might as well be.
Yeah, and I don't know, these last episodes I've been very easygoing. I've had less issues with things because it's okay, I think I know the rules, but it just seems odd for a guy to beat up a giant robot and climb invisible. It's just sort of a harder thing for me to be okay, that's happening.
I was less worried about you with the invisible stairs thing because it's very Final Fantasy. Yeah, I was more expecting you to laugh at the fact that when one of the Death Army ones came out from behind Master Asia, he went from a normal walking speed to a hyper power walk that happened as the club was coming down.
I don't know. Those are sort of what Master Asia is doing is a different visual style than what I've been expecting and a different physics engine than what I've been used to. And I have a lot of problems with sort of this all the jumping around that's done in later Final Fantasies. And the only reason the FF7 movie works-ish is that they've set up. We had 70 hours of game before then that made, where you weren't doing that and you couldn't do that made me care enough. But if I don't know, I guess it just doesn't feel like there was much of that earlier, or it was too cartoony. I don't know. It was too colorful. I don't know. Something about it just snapped me out of the show that I had been sort of lulled into for the last 4-ish episodes. Sure. And I'll probably go back in there again, but maybe if it had been like a brighter backdrop, or maybe if we didn't get so quick, we didn't do this and the Dark Army, the Death Army at the same time. You could have eased me in more. It just was sort of hard to be like, oh, I don't know what, am I supposed to be scared here? Am I supposed to be worried about this Dark Army? Am I supposed to feel like, oh, I hate these guys. They're unnatural
if you're
and
looking
evil.
For something with more heft and more gravitas, this is a popcorn show compared to your dramatic war of ideals. This is a giant robo. This is a super robo series that is just flavored with Gundam, as opposed to your Gundam series, Gundam Wing, which is in fact about the thing that the initial creator had intended, but just offering a little bit of what people were taking in more, consuming more in the 90s, Yeah,
and when Domun's beating up mummies in Egypt, I say, yeah, okay, fine. I'll eat my popcorn. That sounds fine. But when you're trying to do more serious things, and this isn't, I bet they're going to do more things, and there's a very easy chance that they could do them better and more delicately. But this episode, sort of moving forward our introduction to this new, very potent enemy and this big problem that's going to take up most of the show, I imagine. It's sort of hard. It doesn't change the stakes very much to me. They just feel at odds with each other. Unless they want us to be like, yeah, take out the Dark Army, which would be fine. But my issue is I just don't know how to feel here. What does the show want me to feel here? I can't tell.
That last statement is a very fair read. I will give you that. This episode, when watched on its own and not paired off with episode 13, does feel very off kilter. If you're looking at it solely in a vacuum, then yes, I see where you're coming from. I am judging it less poorly because I know that the next episode is an episode that is in conjunction with it. In fact, this is more like a 3 or 4 part arc.
Yeah.
I would watch it all together if it were me, but I'm doing this at your pace.
Yeah, understandable. And just so the audience is clear, I'm not, in all my little quibbles and complaints, I am not saying that G Gundam is not a good show. I don't even know if I'm saying it's not a well-made show, especially since it's been so long since I've done a full run-through of it. I don't think I'm in a position to be able to say that yet. I'm just pointing out what's confusing me and trying to guess as to why, but a lot of that's going to be based on my natural predilections and bias, especially being a foreigner, essentially, to the genre. A lot of things aren't going to make sense. So my questions to you most of the time, Bob, aren't like, why do they do this? This is dumb. It's like, why do they do this? What am I supposed to be taking away from the fact that they did this?
Sure. But I will note, just for the sake of posterity on the podcast, the past handful of episodes, I know that, you're getting really impassioned by this idea and you're really trying to drive it home, not just for us, but also for you listeners out there.
All 3 of you.
My thing is just, I want to make sure that as we press forward, I'm totally up for criticism. Your criticism thus far, totally valid. You've gotten a little red-faced. I can't see him on our call right now, but he sounds red-faced coming across the mic, and that's why I want to make sure that we're on the same page.
Well, yeah, and what it probably is that I think it feels to me like you think I'm sort of coming out and attacking the show, and that's sort of not what my goal is.
Okay. And I might just be misinterpreting because, again, I'm working solely off your vocals right now.
Yeah. So it can be tough, and I've never been great sort of with vocal expression. It's a big chunk of why I've moved into sort of more visual communications. I also have sort of all my years of studying linguistics have given me a strong distrust of words.
Yes.
So it's tough working in a purely audio medium because of that. But, I'm not here to sort of disparage sort of the show that means a lot to you. I'm just trying to understand the mechanics behind it. And then once I know it, then I can know, hey, this could work better if you did this. Or this worked pretty well, but then you lost the opportunity for that because of it. And so that's what I'm interested in doing. And I can do it more easily with Gundam Wing because I know what that show's trying to do. So where it and we have the advantage of having a manga where they tried to fix things as well. So where that show fails or isn't taking its full opportunity, it's much easier for me to pick it out because I've also seen it a million times. So like I know the strings of it, but not only am I not fully cognizant of what this show is trying to do, but I also just I'm a stranger in a strange land. I don't know what the genre hopes to do and what audiences get out of it. I just don't know. So you're sort of my tour guide in this. So my questions to you are just like, hey, why did the Pompeians live near a volcano? And then you would say, well, they didn't know it was a volcano. And I go, okay, well, that makes sense. And there you are.
I'm going to transition us with this line here. When did Troa become David Caruso?
Yeah, so there's sort of a hard thing they do with, well, which David Caruso role are you talking about?
The one that most people know.
Okay. So two problems I have with this episode. One, I guess with what you just said. One, I don't even think we should be with Hiro and Troa yet. They're going to get their own episode next. We don't really need the setup. Not that much happens in it. They actually have a very lengthy B story in there with Zex and some stuff that he's doing. So you already were sort of stretching for time if that's what you're putting in there with it. So you could have sort of set up that stuff there. I think it's nice to have a couple episodes off, and that way you can, again, if you didn't sort of ruin things with your opening theme, you could kind of play around with the idea of like, oh, is Hiro real dead? We don't really know him that much. We don't identify him with that much. Maybe Relina's going to take his Gundam and take his role if Hiro's dead now. We didn't get, we just didn't explore much. Maybe that was because he was going to die. Like, it just opens up so much. And so I think taking 2 episodes to kind of realize that, oh, maybe he's not coming back would be smart. So I don't like that we open up with it right away. I do like some of the moments we get out of it. I like that Catherine hears Troa laugh and remarks on it. I like sort of this awkward moment of him waking up to Catherine. But when I first watched the show, I had a lot of problems with Hiro waking up after the visual of what we see when his Gundam self-destructs. Later on, when I watched Cowboy Bebop, I was sort of annoyed by it less because we sort of set precedent for those types of injuries, and like the level of bandages sort of directly correlates to the amount of damage and how likely you would have just been killed in real life for it. So it gets like a little anime nod, though it sort of ekes me out a little bit. But as for your original comment about Troa David Caruso, the problem with sort of doing a character like Troa is the whole point of him is his lack of emotionality and his sort of backgroundish nature to him, maybe an over-rationalist approach to things. So it's hard to explore him and find that you have any sort of resonance with him or emotions with him, because the whole point is that he's sort of devoid of those.
But that does not explain, like, if he were to be more like a Spock, right?
Yeah.
I would understand. But when you're looking at this circus ringleader and going, oh, yeah, I've got just the show for them. It's going to be a blast. They'll go up in whatever. It's a night they'll never forget. It's going to be my big breakout performance. Whatever the lines are, he keeps using all these really tongue-in-cheek lines while he's in the cab of his truck carrying his Gundam, which I feel like the Ringmaster should know already. And so it completely ruins my suspense of disbelief.
Also agree. What I was sort of talking about earlier with sort of this rationalist approach is just more of just like, I don't know, maybe I'll save it for the next episode, since I'll also tell you some of his backstory there too, and why he sort of is the way he is and what sort of separates him from the other pilots and sort of the way he approaches things. So maybe I'll do it. Yes, the one-liners are bad, and just like we're going to have to do with both of these shows a lot over the course of these episodes, they have a bad case of the 90s. Like, I wish they weren't there either. I was actually hoping that in the Japanese they weren't. We've talked a lot about sort of the B story of here and all the complaints we have. Those complaints will probably continue next week as well when it becomes the A story. But, most of this episode is actually centering on Wu Fei and the return of Sally Poe.
Yes.
And so, how did this work for you, Bob?
Well, I thought it was interesting to see Sally Poe bring herself to the fore as a guerrilla leader fighting as resistance against Oz taking over against the Alliance. It doesn't say that she has necessarily cut ties altogether from alliance beliefs, but it at least shows that she does not like war for war's sake, as opposed to this guy whose name was Bunt.
Colonel Bunt. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Who, for most of the episode is, and his soldiers think too, is fighting for this sort of one of these last bastions of the old alliance to maintain control over the land that they came from, which sort of brings up an interesting, where they overthrew a different leader because they thought what they had is best. So you have this very internal conflict with this backdrop of this old, universal power, which sort of brings up some interesting, thing about sort of how birthright takes an effect and who should govern a nation and what means that they should do it, especially more potent now that the alliance is effectively dissolved under its old leadership. So they could sort of just claim that, yes, we remnants of the alliance are our own country now. Here we are. Sally thinks that, no, we don't like your approach. But then it doesn't matter because randomly out of nowhere, Bunt has decided to side with this really shady-looking Oz guy that doesn't get lines, and he just spends one scene looking menacing. And he betrays his own people, even though we had just spent 2 minutes setting up how much he likes his own soldiers, and I just don't know why we needed any of that. It felt overkill.
I think it's supposed to add into the betrayal of this man who has no honor compared to, his perfect foil, Wu Fei, who is a man solely devoted to this concept of honor that we've seen so far.
So, yeah, that's a good point. Are they using honor in this episode, or are they using justice?
I am using honor. They use the terms justice and strength, I think, are the two big words that they're using.
Okay, so that's the same in English. I just wanted to know because as we talk about some other things.
Well, so that was another thing I wanted to make note of is when I am watching this with the subtitles, I am not listening to every word that comes out in Japanese. So I am relying on the subtitles to be active subtitles and not just taking the translated scripts and placing them as subtitles while listening to the Japanese. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I've actually noticed, at least from this era, anime, that was made then, but then got DVD releases later, they don't always just take from the script. Sometimes, and I think on Gundam Wing and some of the other Gundam shows I have now on DVD, what they do is they bring in another guy to then translate what they're saying and word it his way. Mm. So we would get something different than the script we would have gotten in the 90s.
That's true. Also, just while we were talking about the eye color, I did some research too. Yes, I was right on everybody with the exception of Chibity, who has more of a teal blue as opposed to a blue.
Yeah, but go on. It feels like the same thing to me. Yes, so strength and justice, very important to Wu Fei because... Well, now it's backstory time, Bob.
Ooh.
Wu Fei he and his Gundam come from the oldest colony. It was the first colony that ushered in the AC century. And so the colony is 200 years old and has not aged very well. This will come up later on when we actually go there. But it was made and settled by the Chinese, outcasts. And so the Chinese government had actually moved the strongest, they call it the strongest martial art clan in Asia to there to get rid of them. They are the Long clan. And Wu Fei was actually married to the scion of the Long clan, Mei Lan, who was the granddaughter of the person that taught him martial arts. But he's actually a scholar. And wasn't interested in fighting and didn't believe in fighting and thought that justice wasn't even a thing that exists. It's just a thing people make up to suit their conveniences and achieve the things they want to achieve. But Mei Lan, who came from this family that was under political attack and knew that, was part of this group that was building the Shenlong Gundam, to rebel against the Alliance and to rebel against Oz that wanted to remove them from power in this colony too, thought that was just an intellectual blah, blah, blah. And so then they get in a fight about it and Wu Fei beats her, even though she's the strongest in the strongest clan of Asia. quite easily, and he thinks that he's won, but his master sort of says, well, I mean, you beat her and you forced her to see the way things you see because of it, but does that mean that you won because she doesn't believe you? She just has to believe it now. And so he muses on that, but thinks that those weak shouldn't fight. Or the people shouldn't fight if they're not weak enough because they're just going to get people killed, and there's no point in fighting over ideals. But then the Alliance, led by General Septem, whose head we get seen shot off as he's thrown out of a plane for the double kill at the end of episode 7, he wants to lead in that. He wants to actually have Sally Poe poison the entire colony so they can get rid of the elements that they believe are rebelling and don't yet know they're building Gundam to stop them. And Sally Poe says, no, I don't want to do that. And then interestingly enough, Trace says, that's barbaric. You're ridiculous. I'm sending my guys in there and we're going to do this the old fashioned way. And it's the first time in history that Oz and the Alliance had disagreed over something. And so a couple of Leos go in to fight off the people who are building the Gundam. Meilong goes out in a very crippled version of the Tall Geese model and goes to fight. Wu Fei has to take the Shenlong Gundam out because he thinks she's going to get killed over something stupid. And he goes out there. They battle. He defeats them. She has to sacrifice herself to protect him. And then he agrees to take out, and he knows that these troops were sent by Trace, so he takes the Shenlong Gundam to Earth to get revenge on Trace for killing his wife that maybe he didn't love. Maybe they didn't love each other. We don't know. For a lot of it, they seem to kind of hate each other, but maybe there's some sort of mutual respect. Maybe they grew a love over the course of this kind of prologue story. But that's what he's doing down there. And so when he goes down there thinking he needs to be strong and to protect and to get revenge, that's what he views justice as. He needs to fight Trace and defeat him for justice's sake, but he's not strong enough to do it. He doesn't want to be a bully like the Alliance was, just fighting people that are only weaker than them, so he doesn't want to fight at all. And so that's how we get here.
Who the hell is Nataku?
Nataku is a Chinese mythological warrior put together by, I don't know, primal human energy and blood, and sort of came from the mountains, a particular mountain. I think they were the Kunlun Mountains. He's often depicted as a warrior or a hermit. He's just sort of hanging out in mountains. And so she took on the name Nataku because that was what was motivating her to defend her people and her people's history and her family and their martial arts sort of discipline.
Now there's context for why he refers to Nataku.
because she died protecting that suit as sort of the key symbol to revolution, he feels that her spirit is in there. And, being overprotective of it is something that's going to play a bigger part in the show and in the movie, even though this character, Meilong, is never referenced at all. So, but then, when Sally says, people join our fight because we're weak, is sort of a continuation of what Meilong was always talking to him about. And it's a very strong theme about sort of the nature of the show itself and what it wants to explore, and why the manga is called, quite annoyingly longly, Gundam Wing, Endless Waltz, Glory to the Losers.
Does his former wife look anything at all like Sally Poe?
No. No, she's sort of also, I don't know, it feels like they're going for a very traditional kind of Chinese look with Wu Fei. She's just sort of the, I don't know, tomboy female monk version of what you would expect.
Okay. Well, I ask because Sally Poe is apparently a Chinese national per the way that they explained it in the story. So I wasn't going to presume one way or the other. And while it might sound kitschy, when you do this kind of story and you start introducing an individual like her into the fray, especially in the way that we're seeing her so far, it feels like she would bear some resemblance to that person that is going to be so important, so integral to his background and story moving forward.
No, it's just sort of the same philosophy of like fighting a losing battle because you know it's the right thing to do, or it's where your values lead you or your heart leads you.
Yeah.
Similar a little bit to what Hiro was alluding to in his portion of the story for this episode, and we'll get sort of a larger look at next episode.
Yeah, I was surprised, though, to just to come back to that B story, I was surprised to see Troa laugh his ass off at that very bleak line. If you're going to do it better than I did. It hurts like hell.
It hurts like hell, yeah.
And he just, like you just did, maybe with a bit more of a guffaw to it.
Yeah.
Troa laughs his ass off. It's the first time we see him with emotion throughout the entire series.
Yeah, and it's sort of, and I think there's sort of a tension release because it's sort of the first time probably any of these pilots have seen Hiro act something resembling human. Because everybody's sort of viewing him and they just think of him as like this machine or this perfect soldier or this Batman-like guy that just sort of does everything crazy-like. And now Troa maybe kind of responds to that sort of turning yourself into a machine kind of mentality of getting the job done and worries that whatever remnant emotions that are in him are making him a weaker soldier and blaming that on their recent defeat. But when he sees sort of this this perfect version of a soldier in his eyes, sort of make that sort of dark black humor joke, he's just like, I don't know. He's more approachable now. It's relaxing.
Mm. Would you say that there is some sort of a rebirth that is occurring with Hiro as of this and the following episode?
No, what I think we're getting is I had a screenwriting teacher in my undergraduate, and he brought up the Shrek thing where he says, you remember in Shrek when the donkey's talking about onions and
well, he's talking about, it's what's his face? Shrek says that ogres have layers. Donkey's like, why not a cake or parfait? No, ogres are onions.
Yeah, so the teacher wanted to hit into us that your main character has an arc, and your supporting characters and your bad guy, they have layers, and that's what makes them interesting. So I think another reason why I think Hiro is not our protagonist, but it's Relina and a few of these other pilots as like sub-protagonists. I think Hiro isn't really changing from what we know about it. We just now have the opportunity to see what these more layers are. I don't think anything. I think, like he sort of alluded to, I think he's always tried to do his job to the best of his ability and sacrifice himself when it's for the good of the cause. Even that most recent time that looked like it had worked when he exploded the Gundam, I think he did it because that's what his heart told him to. And so he's not changing to discover that. He's saying that, and we're like, oh, Hiro isn't quite who we think he is. What is going on here? Maybe there is something to what Relina's seeing that we were all missing.
Mm.
And so I think we spent a lot of the show kind of learning more and more who Hiro is rather than him changing and seeing everybody else change around him. In a way, he's sort of a catalyst hero.
Well, I'm going to be curious about that as we move forward, and maybe I'll pick up on something that you haven't gotten in your 8 to 10 times of watching the series.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to make any bold claims such as that.
That's fine. And sometimes, watching it through someone's new eyes helps inform, because I can only experience it once, but also I can only experience it once through my eyes. But you are a person very different from me who's into very different things. And so what you're going to take away in your first experience is going to be different. And it might reformulate or recalculate thoughts that I have, or at the very least open up new doors for what could be going on.
Certainly. Now, I feel like just because we are prone to going at length, and I feel like we've spent a lot of time digging deep. I know that you love Gundam so much, but maybe we should poke into
the nerd corner? Oh, the way we go.
Well, I mean, the nerd corner, I'm okay to jump ahead because I feel like with the nerd, with the way we go, I'll admit, I laughed at Master Asia during that first match. that thing where he's doing the absurd wuxia stuff. Not throughout the bulk of it. I thought him catching the wiffle ball bullets when this series has gone so far as to have mostly plasma laser stuff. Yeah, there's like the Vulcan bullets, but to have full on cannonball sized wiffle balls that he's shoving into a rifle, it was kind of funny, kind of absurd. And then to just go from like a normal fast walk to somebody turned the speed up to 0.18 or 1.8, 2.8. He just goes from it was humorous, and then obviously his head on top of the fireball while he's inside his Gundam. These are all humorous moments.
Yeah, and the way we go, doesn't necessarily have to directly be about or comment on the shows themselves, but just sort of like an idea.
What it makes us think of, though, right?
Yeah. So, like for me, my way we go this week is sort of seeing Master Asia, teaching Domon. You're saying he's undefeated in the East. Well, I guess the show says it too. But you're sort of drawing. I had sort of thought, based on his sort of clothing, maybe he's supposed to be from China. You're right. They did say he was representing Hong Kong. And so China and Japan. And I'm just thinking they've had sort of a dicey history in, our industrialist era. So in the 90s, I was wondering, how did China and Japan sort of view each other? And you have sort of this major character from China. Wu Fei obviously is from China. We spent a lot of time with him. How was Japan and China sort of cool in 1994, or are they getting along okay?
That's a big jump, buddy.
What's going on?
So what's going on is Hong Kong, at least by Japan, if not Japan, America, and a lot of other quote unquote first world nations, is considered separate for the better part of it from primary mainland China. China, as you may have seen in both of these series so far, is treated more like there is a hint of the mysticism and the very caricature concept of what China might be. And a lot of that stems from an inherent racism that is brought between the two of them. And considering the rape of Beijing, and it might not be Beijing, it might be another one of the major cities, but it was a big thing that happened where Japanese soldiers invaded China, did a whole lot of bad, a lot of bad, and they've never apologized for it, and they've both just kind of sat on it between mainland China and Japan over all the awful things that happened. However, Hong Kong is basically the idealization of what if China were able to act more in a way like the United States. That place is often given a bump up on the scale. Sure, there's some shady business that happens in Hong Kong, but at the very least, there's the freedom to do so without having a lot of the Mao dynasty regime over everybody's heads and everything else.
So it's called The Rape of Nanjing, and I guess
Nanjing, thank you.
So why are they? Because they sort of do it in a lot of the earlier Gundam shows too. Why, if they're having this very awkward relationship with their neighbor, why are they including China so much in their show, in their shows? What would make them want to do that?
Martial arts.
Okay.
Look at these two shows.
Yeah.
Okay. In G Gundam, we have Neo China as one of our 5 because not only does it give us, somebody who can play into the dragon themes that we aren't going to use in our primary Gundam, because we like to incorporate dragons wherever we can in these types of shows.
Yeah.
But also, we have someone who's supposed to represent the Shaolin Temple.
Yeah.
We're not going to have Neo Nepal or, any of the other surrounding areas join up in that same way. If you want to have a Shaolin monk, you have to grab them from China. If you want to have a general martial artist or a something that can feel like it is Pan-Asian, go to Hong Kong. And when you were just talking about the Shenlong Gundam and Wu Fei and everything else, they went China because they wanted to still have, it's a future timeline, but we're still having this idea of scholarly efforts versus martial efforts and trying to still incorporate some of this old world living in a new world. It's no different than when people like to do England and still trying to find a way to force knights and sword and sorcery into it somehow or another. Look at the Kingsmen, right? Kingsmen, the Secret Service, has everybody have code names based on Arthurian legend, So they'll find a way, any way that they can, when you have people who are outside of a given nation, to try and pull in the bare basics that has become
easy to culturally appropriate and turn into a flavor that people will buy into.
So if you need to go to China to get these martial art types, is there like a lack of respect or interest in the Japanese martial arts?
From the Japanese? No, I don't think so. We have our primary protagonist who learned under the one who knows all of them to teach him in his own version of a school, because all the different variations are just different different codes, different belief systems of what proper fighting is, what you believe the best technique to be. And those beliefs inform the way the style develops. There's a slew of different martial arts in Japan, let alone all over the world. So rather than having to go into the very specific, and then, because most of these martial arts end up being in unrealistic shows, they have to come up with their own schools. So that way they can not have to worry about too much of the study and actual concepts behind a given school's nature. But now you can come up with your own cool looking things that you don't have to relate to something and somebody be like, well, actually, that punch should go this way and should require less force in order to act in that same level of power. You just wait a week or noob. It's definitely more that they're trying to create that sense of awe from ethnic diversity, right? I wouldn't think of looking at Neo France and thinking of them in the same knightly way that I would have of Neo England, but they wanted to give Neo England the musketeer vibe, which on saying that feels even weirder, because when you say musketeer, you don't think muskets, you think the people who wield the rapiers. So
you think of the French novel. Yes. Mm-hmm.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
So, the point that I'm trying to get at is, it is not that this Japanese story is trying to downplay Japanese martial arts, but because it is so culturally common, it is not as flavorful to, this fantastic world. You're trying to show a variety of different things. And so if you have this pan-general thing going on for Domon and his teacher, it's a lot easier to ingest that as something awe-inspiring instead of, oh man, look at our judo champion. Sure does throw. Oh man, look at this guy who knows Goju Ryu. Hope he doesn't run into someone that has a catchy bonbon technique. It's not meant to be reality. It's meant to be flavor.
Gotcha. All right. Well, now, are you ready for a little trip to the nerd corner?
You know what? I think I am.
So I feel a little silly about my nerd corner because I don't think they need my tiny little advertising plug here at all. But I'm sort of looking forward to it with sort of cautious alms. But the trailer came out this week for Final Fantasy 16.
I'm glad you brought it up, because if you didn't, I was gonna.
Which last, Shinji and I were sort of lamenting that as 15 had come out, it was like the first time in a long, long time that they didn't have the next one in development at any stage. They just didn't know what to do. They weren't sure if they would be able to do one, because if 15 had failed, they just wouldn't be making them anymore. Everything was sort of riding on it and the weird production it had. But it sounds like not only have they started working on it somewhere between then and now, they feel comfortable enough to release a trailer of it. And I won't lie, I don't get what's going on in the trailer, but I sort of like it that way. I think it's nice to
I have a take on that, but I'll wait until you're done with your
I'm not interested in knowing. Shinji kept trying to throw thoughts at me last night, and I don't want to know. I like going in blind as best I can, just to sort of let it happen and not go in with preconceived notions. I like sort of taking a break and going back to this historical kind of medieval landscape. We haven't done that since 12. So kind of fun to sort of kind of go back to our basics. I don't know. It looks like you turn into summons, which could be fun. They do seem to be an important part of the aspect, which can be, hit or miss, how strong they are for the story. But overall, it looks exciting. And I look forward to getting a PS5 to play it whenever it comes out.
I will say, now I have to come up with something on the quick for my nerd corner.
We can just talk about how great Final Fantasy 16 is. That's all.
So I'm going to do you one different.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a dick, and I'm going to give you my take on it.
Well, first, let me just say, before you do, because I forgot to bring this up, I love what they have done with the music here. I love how they've sort of reinterpreted these great old themes. So I'm especially looking forward to the soundtrack more than anything. All right, you can give me your take.
All right. I mean, it's not mind blowing or anything. I am unsure whether or not the younger kid and the elder man with the scar on his face are supposed to be the same or not based on the way they do the final shot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Understandable.
But it's either going to be another time skipping situation like we had in 15. There's no major spoilers. There's a time skip somewhere in there.
Which I didn't like. I wasn't a fan of that.
I was not in love with it either, especially because they just kind of hand wave it.
Yeah, and it's so tacked on. It's right at the end. I don't know why it needed to be there, but go on.
I mean, I kind of get it, but I don't love it.
I mean, quite frankly, I think they did it for the sake of that MMORPG, which I'm not. Which I don't like.
No, that was absolutely the reason.
But you can go on.
But so if it's not that, it's a brothers' war. One's on one side, one's on the other. That's the other take that I get from that character or characters. The fact that when that young kid, that kid who seems so sweet, even though he has an overprotective, shitty seeming parent or two, because he's apparently touched by the Phoenix. What's interesting, especially because of the art that they've chosen to use as part of the major logo for it, is that when the Phoenix leaves, it leaves behind this second form, and that seems to turn into Ifrit.
Yeah. And
then we have this, to call it back to earlier in the episode, this sort of God and the devil vibe. We have this Phoenix, this eternal symbol of life, fighting this Ifrit, which comes from the Indian folklore for a kind of jinn. Mm-hmm. All right. We translated it into IFRIT, Ifrit, and we've continued to call it that since, but it's an Ifrit. And they've always tended to make it seem more like a devil, more demonic. I'm thinking 7. I'm even thinking 10 with the whole beast with the long jagged horns and everything else. Even in 15, they made him out to look more like a Lucifer character.
And I like that you bring up sort of this Brothers' War aspect, because I actually think sort of it was hard to. What made it really confusing was everybody talking all the time. If they'd actually had less talking, it would have. I don't know. I think I would have been more focused, and you could have told something more interestingly. But I think sort of the way they kind of set up a lot of those visuals, I almost wonder if they're actually it's going to be a game where you can pick which character you play as, and your story is very different depending on which one you pick, on which side of the conflict.
That would be nice. I would be interested in seeing if that is the case, because having to play a game from two sides might make it feel less. I know a big complaint that I heard from people was if you weren't doing all the side missions, the game was really short. If you don't do all the hunts or anything in 15, the game can be just snapped through in about 20 hours.
Yeah, and I try to, it does annoy me too, and I try to leave 15 out of it because that game just changed so much and got so rushed because of the difficulties.
The production situation.
Yeah, the difficulties they had with 13 that led them to have to change verses to 15 and it coming in last, and a different 15 project kind of dropping out. And so whatever game they'd want, but I also think there was sort of too much of a leaning on the American style of game, which I'm not a fan of. And so I think you're getting pulled in all these directions. I don't think your game was going to be very successful. It's fine.
But be prepared for the fact that they show a very similar, not the same style of phasing system as they had with Noctis.
That's fine.
Which is why I keep referring to it.
Yeah, that's fine. Whatever. I don't. Combat is never going to go back to turn-based, so I'm always going to be disappointed by that. But that's just where games are now. I have to get over it. So I'll get it. But I would just like. And it was the same problem I kind of had with 12 too. I would like to be less attention paid to all the side stuff. I don't care about those stuff. I don't want to do them. I don't care. And you just think you have put more game in there than you have. It lets you be lazy. But what I like is that, because like what you see in some of the images are like your traditional, like an empire's coming to invade, and you're just like, okay, you know, that is sort of the downside of doing the fantasy thing. You have to have your evil empire come on in to invade. But if like one of your guys was on one side of the conflict and one of your guys was on the other side of the conflict, and you could play from both stories, it's harder to make a story about good triumphing over evil then, and you get to do something much more interesting. And so like now and I'm hoping for this because like that's a great thing that Gundam likes to do. And so I'm hoping that we get to finally have a Final Fantasy game where we get to see sort of the conflict itself is the villain more than who's perpetrating it, because in this scenario where you get to play both in a perfect world, both of them would be sort of victims in a way.
We get to see that a Dragoon is going to exist in this space. So hopefully we'll actually see something maybe akin to a job system or something.
All right, we have prattled on long enough about something that isn't Gundam related at all. So I would like to thank Lev Van Rensselaer for keeping an eye on those audio boards. That's very helpful. And of course, we would like to thank Bob for joining us this week and this season. Bob, you got any plugs for us?
Sure. I don't have any jokes to make about other types of plugs, so I'll just do the plugs that you're asking.
Thank goodness.
Heck, you too. You can find me as Bob Scary VOA on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and several other places. You can also find me at bobscaryvoa.com, where you can listen to my demos for commercial promotion, narration, and my favorite character. You can also find me on Casting Call Club, Upwork, soon Fiverr, and voices.com. So if you need a voice for anything, whether that be a major production, a minor production, just for your kid's birthday to make me sound like some random character that he heard on Umizoomi, by all means, contact me and let me know.
And I am your host, Patrick Scale. You can find my features, documentaries, short films, animations, web video essays, and behind-the-scenes footage at quixoticunited.com, and some sort of social media of some sort of similar variety of name. Thank you all for listening. Bob, tell the audience what the cutest Cthulhu is.
My favorite Cthulhu is the one that shows up in The Crawling Love, Nyarlathotep, or Nyarko-chan. Yeah, she's not cute like a little baby, but she's like a hot mom with a big anime chest. And you can cut me off at any time. This is the point. Just one big communication.
Yeah.
But then
okay,
as it lets my...
Hold on.
Yeah.
We're going to roll it back. You're going to do Jello, and I'm going to give you a different vocal, okay?
Okay. And joining me with this week is my co-host, the Jello-like Bob... Oh, nope, I screwed it up.
Bad Scary.
That doesn't feel like Jello to me. All right.
If Jello could talk, what would it sound like? I believe that.
Kill me.
Kill me, Seymour.